Okay, so here is a snippet from Politicon 2017 debate between Cenk Uygur and Ben Shapiro. I remember watching this and being surprised at how well Cenk did. Not because he's wrong, quite the contrary. He has the data on his side. But these soundbite debates are more of a game of rhetorical one-upmanship. Whoever has the better sounding talking points within the allotted time apparently comes off as the winner. I'm reminded of the old evolution versus creation debates where Kent Hovind, despite being wrong about pretty much everything, would mow through actual scientists because of his clever sophistry, and the fact that the scientists were scrambling to respond to nonsense they'd never heard while maintaining intellectual honesty, all within a few minutes. Despite this setup, and the fact that Ben Shapiro is the political equivalent of Kent Hovind, Cenk did well, and possibly even came off sounding better. In part, I think this is because Ben Shapiro is almost so good at this, that it becomes obvious, even to people who aren't well versed in these subjects, that he is just a grifter. Like a salesman who you know is trying to sell you a defective product. You can't pinpoint where they are full of it, but you can tell they're hiding something. That is Ben Shapiro. In any case, I wanted to play one section where Shapiro came off especially well. In this section, they're debating demand-side versus supply-side economics. Cenk is arguing that more money needs to be concentrated on the middle class so they can buy products and services, whereas Shapiro is arguing that it needs to go to the top so the money will be invested. Keep in mind this debate is happening after 40 years of trickle-down economics. Here in the US, we've slashed taxes on the wealthy and on corporations. We've gutted unions. As a result, the median income has fallen relative to the costs of living as the added gains of the economy have gone to the top. Has the economy grown at a faster rate? No. In fact, GDP growth has actually been slower. What has happened is that all of this added wealth at the top has come at the expense of everyone else's income. 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and are one emergency away from bankruptcy. And that's before the COVID-19 crisis. We have the highest income inequality of all advanced OECD countries. At this point, we need to focus on the demand side. There is plenty of money at the top. In any case, before we get started, make sure you subscribe and click the notification link.
It would be preposterous to set the tax rate at 0. It would be preposterous to set it at 100%. So what we have to do as a society is figure out where we can maximize the most amount of good for the country.
Should it be closer to 0 or closer to 100?
Government, but not too much away from us. So, for example, the reason why when taxes are higher, it winds up being better for the economy is because it recirculates the money. So if you give it to the rich, this is hilarious. If you're uneducated, please at least don't make it obvious.
This is the most interesting conversation on taxes I've heard.
If you don't know the concept of recirculation of money, then go look it up. And so the way that it works is that when the middle class has more money, disposable income, they spend it. Why? Because they're not living in the lap of luxury. They're not saving it for their yacht. So they need to buy food for their family. They need education for their family. So they spend it and it goes back into the economy. If you just give it in supply side economics to the rich and hope that it trickles down on us eventually decades later, what they wind up doing with it is something that is logical. They save it. But that means it does not recirculate in the economy. And that is why when you have lower taxes, ironically, the economy does worse. But of course it's a balancing act.
Okay, so now you're making a strong case for Keynesian economics, which is totally fine, obviously. The problem with Keynesian economics is that it doesn't even work in theory because, again, once you go to the logical extreme, which is remove all of the money from the rich people who are saving all their money and give it to all the poor people to buy hamburgers, that doesn't help the economy or spur the economy.
The logical extreme? That's a straw man argument. Cenk clearly stated that there's a balancing act. In other words, there's a point of diminishing returns, where taxes on the wealthy are too high. Shapiro is ignoring this and proceeding with his usual straw man argument.
What spurs the economy is a higher level... What spurs the economy is the creation of new products and services, and that is only going to be done by people who have expendable capital to actually invest in the new products and services that we all enjoy. This is what creates economic growth.
Sure, but those people aren't stupid. If people don't have money to buy their products or services, they have no reason to invest. So instead of reinvesting into the economy, what they'll do is engage in stock buybacks, or corporate buyouts, which actually shed jobs. Right now corporations are sitting on tons of capital. The wealth has accumulated at the top. In other words, we've exceeded the logical extreme of Shapiro's argument. We are the point where we need to get this money into the hands of everyday people. People who will spend this money directly back into the main street economy. Including buying healthcare so they don't, I don't know, die.
It's also worth noting that this myth that spending is inherently better for an economy than saving, that's only true if you're talking about somebody's actually taking the cash and just shoving it into their mattress.
Another straw man argument. No one is saying that spending is inherently better than saving. The argument is that up to a certain point, the former will stimulate the economy more.
Banks are in the business of lending. When they take the money in, they don't just stick it in Al Gore's fake lockbox. They actually lend the money back out to people to actually create new businesses and new products.
Notice how Shapiro has reframed the discussion. The debate was giving everyday people money to spend versus allocating it to the top, where instead of going directly into the real economy, much of it will go overseas, or to long-term investments, or stock buybacks, or investing in the latest financial scheme that will bring the economy to its knees. Shapiro is instead addressing the difference between your average Joe spending his money versus putting into his community bank. And even in Shapiro's conveniently reframed scenario, this money won't be reallocated to the economy as quickly as putting into the hands of someone who spends 100% of their income just getting by. They will spend it on car repairs, or at the store, or something else that's urgent. Why? Because starting a new business requires many expenses that have nothing to do with hiring people nor spending it back into the local economy.
You had an investor, right? When you started TYT, you were given $4 million by Buddy Roemer to start TYT. That's great. That's the way business should work, right? But that money it didn't come from a bunch of poor people buying hamburgers. It came from a very, very wealthy guy who gave you money to create a business a lot of people want to patronize.
Again, with the reframing. Most business owners aren't millionaires investing in political passion projects. They are investing in everyday businesses like restaurants, laundromats, vehicle repair shops that require an influx of paying customers to keep the lights on and feed their families. If their customers don't have money, they can't keep their lights on.
If you want better products and better services, you need more investment in the products and services. The basic name trickle-down economics. The basic name trickle-down economics is not something that any conservative even proposed. It's a leftist revision of what economics actually is, because you're not giving me the money. It was my money in the first place, created through voluntary transactions that I had with others. I've not stolen money from anyone, neither have you. And the idea that money has to be forcibly taken from you and handed to somebody at the bottom end of the economic spectrum to somehow jog the economy, that may jog McDonald's, but is not going to jog all of the creation of the products and services that make all of our lives much better today than they were 30 years ago in terms of the stuff we have access to.
Notice Shapiro's obsession with McDonald's. As if people struggling to get by are simply going to use extra money to buy hamburgers.
So I'll try to answer that as briefly as I can, and I'll go on to your questions. So when you talk about, hey, the banks they're not going to just keep the money, they're going to put it out and lend it to people, unless they decided to do their own investments, which is what they did because we repealed Glass-Steagall. So it's not as simple as, oh, I have money, so then I will now utilize it or I'll lend it out. So that is way oversimplistic. Speaking of oversimplistic, to say that, oh, well, they'll go buy hamburgers with it, come on.
You were the one who said
So
food.
the middle class is struggling right now. And we've turned this into a Walmart economy where people are getting $7.25. And that if you're getting around $10, I think that's about $15,000 a year. So that is serious pain and difficulties. So if you give those people money, it's not like, I just want to go get a hamburger.
No, they
desperately need that money, and yes, they will spend it all back into the economy. So that's an economic fact. And so And Ben, for the 88th time, we have to find a balance where you have provided an incentive for people to save and invest, and you have provided an incentive for people to be able to put money back into the economy and to be able to live. And it's not, and taxes is not stealing from you. So you're right, I run a business. So in order for people, my employees, to get to my company, you know what they have to do? They have to drive on roads. Okay, so it's not stealing from me to build that road. That helps my business. They had to go to school. The fact that they went to public schools allows them to work for me. All these things are things that I benefit from. I didn't build that company by myself. Every single person that works there helped me to build that company. And that's what it means to work together.
Okay, so enough of Ben Shapiro's sophistry for one video. It's unlikely he really believes much of what he's saying anyhow, since he's essentially a mouthpiece for old money interests that simply want to retain historically low tax rates and minimal regulations. Now let's hear a little more on this topic from Nick Hanauer, an actual billionaire entrepreneur who actually did what Shapiro keeps alluding to, that is, providing products and services.
Jobs are a consequence of a circle of life-like feedback loop between customers and businesses. And only consumers can set in motion this virtuous cycle of increasing demand and hiring. In this sense, an ordinary consumer is more of a job creator than a capitalist like me. That's why when business people take credit for creating jobs, it's a little bit like squirrels taking credit for creating evolution. It's actually the other way around. Anyone who's ever run a business knows that hiring more people is a course of last resort for capitalists. It's what we do if and only if rising consumer demand requires it. And in this sense, calling ourselves job creators isn't just inaccurate, it's disingenuous. That's why our existing policies are so upside down. When the biggest tax exemptions and the lowest tax rates benefit the richest, all in the name of job creation, all that happens is that the rich get richer. Since 1980, the share of income for the top 1% of Americans has more than tripled, while our effective tax rates have gone down by 50%. If it was true that lower taxes for the rich and more wealth for the wealthy led to job creation, today we would be drowning in jobs. And thank you. And yet, unemployment and underemployment is at record highs. Another reason that this idea is so wrong-headed is that there can never be enough super rich people to power a great economy. Somebody like me makes hundreds or thousands of times as much as the median American, but I don't buy hundreds or thousands of times as much stuff. My family owns 3 cars, not 3,000. I buy a few pairs of pants and shirts a year like most American men. Occasionally we go out to eat with friends. I can't buy enough of anything to make up for the fact that millions of unemployed and underemployed Americans can't buy any new cars, any clothes, or enjoy any meals out. Nor can I make up for the falling consumption of the vast majority of middle-class families that are barely squeaking by, buried by spiraling costs and trapped by stagnant or declining wages. Here's an incredible fact, that if the typical American family still retained the same share of income that they did in 1970, they'd earn like $45,000 more a year. Imagine what our economy would be like if that were the case. Significant privileges have come to people like me, capitalists, for being perceived as job creators at the center of the economic universe, and the language and metaphors we use to defend the current economic and social arrangements is telling. It's a small jump from job creator to the creator. This language obviously wasn't, this language was not chosen by accident. And it's only honest to admit that when somebody like me calls themselves a job creator, we're not just describing how the economy works, but more particularly, we're making a claim on status and privileges that we deserve. Speaking of special privileges, the extraordinary differential between the 15% tax rate that capitalists pay on carried interest, dividends, and capital gains, and the 35% top marginal rate on work that ordinary Americans pay, is kind of hard to justify without a touch of deification. We've had it backwards for the last 30 years. Rich people like me don't create jobs. Jobs are a consequence of an ecosystemic feedback loop between customers and businesses. And when the middle class thrives, businesses grow and hire, and owners profit. That's why taxing the rich to pay for investments that benefit all is such a fantastic deal for the middle class and the rich. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's an idea worth spreading. In a capitalist economy, the true job creators are middle-class consumers. And taxing the rich to make investments that make the middle class grow and thrive is the single shrewdest thing we can do for the middle class, for the poor, and for the rich. Thank you.